Welcome to round 2 of this Legacy Cube draft. So yeah, I like this hand. We got a Tundra, we got a couple islands, we can get Taxium Probe into another cantrip, and we're working our way to Wormcoil Engine and Forbid, so I'm okay with this. And there's Sneak Attack. Now we can't cast this or Assemble the Legion yet, which could be a little awkward, but I'm still okay with the hand. Let's just go ahead and get Taxium Probe, see what we're up against here. Our opponent's played a Swamp so far, and more importantly, we'll get to draw a card. Okay, so it looks like some sort of reanimation strategy. They have Dread Return. I'm not too worried about the Chainer's Edict. Hypnotic Spectre, that's something we're going to have to be careful of. That could tear apart our hand, but we draw a Condemn, so that's very good. So hopefully we'll be able to deal now with the Spectre so we don't lose our key cards, and our opponent's going to get a Scry out of the Temple. So our opponent's playing potentially some blue and red as well, so it's interesting. Maybe some blue for counter magic to protect the reanimation combos. I don't know. Red for removal. I guess we'll see. Alright, so we do get our Bloodstained Mire, which is going to let us fetch up a mountain for Sneak Attack as well as Assemble the Legion, so that's great. Here comes the Hypnotic Spectre as we expected. And now we're just going to have to kind of play around this by hanging on to mana for Condemn. We have our Mountain, Master of Waves, so not a great draw here with this hand. So we're just going to have to wait for our opponent to attack in and use the Condemn. I mean, if our opponent did something crazy, like some sort of crazy reanimation combo here, we do have the Forbid open as well. Alright, so there's the attack. Go ahead and Condemn. That protects really our end game, which is our cards like Wormcoil Engine, Assemble the Legion, and perhaps Sneak Attack, depending on how our draws go. We don't really want to lose those cards. Alright, so we're up to 4 mana. I could just hold the Sneak Attack and figure if I need to use it, I can just go ahead and wait till I draw into another red source, and then I can just play it and Sneak Attack creature and play the same turn. However, that's a big leap of faith, really counting on the fact that I pull another red source. So I could keep the Forbid up, but instead I'm just going to play the Sneak Attack because the coast seems clear. I mean, our opponent has drawn some cards since we saw their hand, but they really didn't have anything doing at that time. So I'm going to take the risk here, just play the Sneak Attack, get out on the board, and seems like it paid off. Our opponent didn't have a play there. Spell Pierce is nice too, so now we have that in our hands, and I'm just going to get Assemble the Legion online. If our opponent can't do anything about this, it's going to just start beating down. Again, it makes us vulnerable for a turn, but again, our opponent did nothing last turn, and they really haven't shown us that they have any big plays right now, so we're going to take advantage of that a little bit. Opponent gets a second blue, and they get Glen Elendra. So this is a good card. Now, I'm a little concerned at this point because I want to be able to use my Forbid and perhaps my Spell Pierce, and Glen Elendra could basically help our opponent win a counterspell war. If anything's going to beat us, it's going to be the fact that we're not going to be able to counter a big play later. So, okay, our Assemble the Legion's online. We draw Opposition. Now, Opposition and Assemble the Legion would be amazing cards, but our opponent doesn't appear to be going wide. They appear to be going tall with their creatures, so Opposition isn't quite as good in this matchup, at least from what I've seen so far. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to cast Opposition. I think our opponent's just going to have to counter it, or at least feel like they have to counter it, especially with the Legion in play, and that at least brings Glen Elendra down to a 1/1, so we're not getting beat down for 2 a turn, and also allows us to get to the point where we'll be able to play either our Spell Pierce or Forbid at some point without getting into a counterspell war. So I'm just going to do that, and it pays off. Our opponent does in fact counter it, which I think is fine for us. Like I said, it's a nice combo to have, but I don't see our opponent going wide with a lot of creatures or anything like that. So we'll be going wide enough to get around what they have. So opposition in a lot of ways was kind of a dead card for us, but it's just the scary threat of that combo I think is enough for our opponent to counter it. Vampire Hex Mage, now that's interesting because that can remove the counters on our Legion and slow it down a little bit at some point, but really I'm not too worried about a play like that. Next turn we're going to have 3 soldier tokens with haste. Turn after that we'll have an additional 3 on top of it. So Old Man's not a bad draw here. It's a good blocker, and I can kind of force our opponent's hand by stealing the Hex Mage, or I could try to steal Glen Elendra if it comes down to it, to free up the ability to use my counter spells. So that's actually a real good draw for us. Still 1 mana short of Wormcoil Engine. So we'll just attack in here. Let's just start getting our opponent's life total down. They can block 1 of these creatures. They'll be taking 2, bring them down to 20. And next turn we'll have 5 Haste Legion tokens on the battlefield, assuming they don't take the counters off by sacrificing the Hex Mage. Go for the throw. So they take out Old Man of the Sea. They protect effectively their Glen Elendra. Good play. I mean, there's nothing obviously worth using that on at this point for them. So they ponder. I'd rather see that than anything else. I'm just going to check here. Okay. Still pondering. Chose to shuffle their library. Okay, that's good for us. They didn't like what they had on top. I just want to see if they kept something on top and drew, they could be drawing into something to reanimate with their Dredge Return, which we know is in their hand. They also still have the Chainer's Edict. That's not really hurting us though at this point. Alright, Glen Elendra gets in there. And no play from our opponent. Alright. So we'll get more soldiers. Deep Analysis, good card for us. We've been missing that 6 land drop. We haven't hit anything worth sneak attacking either. But the good news is if we draw 2 cards, we have a real good chance of hitting that land drop. Our opponent could counter that, but if they do, that's also quite fine, because then that will turn on Forbid and Spell Pierce for us. Just like that, our opponent takes 4 damage. Some of the Legion just gets out of control so fast. So let's draw some cards here, see if our opponent counters it. Even if they do counter it, we can play the flashback. So, okay, in response, we're going to Forbidden Alchemy. So they're still digging. Let's see what they get in the graveyard. It doesn't look like they hit anything. Misty Rainforest, Reanimate. Dark Ritual. So they have Ritual, Hypnotic Spectre. That's worth noting. Okay, and we draw a Future Sight here, as well as that 6 land. We can Spell Pierce. I mean, if it's a big enough play, our opponent can counter it, assuming they have blue mana. And they're going to Impulse. I mean, I could Spell Pierce this. I'm just going to let it resolve, though. Maybe the right thing to do is Spell Pierce that, but I mean, our opponent just seems like they're desperate and they're just digging for something. And Impulse doesn't put anything in the graveyard. It goes to the bottom of the library, so I'm not worried about them getting something to toss in their library and reanimate, so I'm just going to hold on to that. So I assume opponent's probably going to sacrifice the Hex Mage here, since they're attacking in, trying to get a couple points of damage with it before it goes away. Because they know, I mean, I'll have 8 soldier tokens if they don't. If they do sacrifice it, I'll only have 5 soldier tokens next turn, which is still sizable. It just kind of delays the inevitable. And depending on what I want to do next turn too, I mean, I could play Wormcoil Engine. That's just going to be a hard threat to deal with, and we can start gaining life. Opponent does have a play here, though. Desecration Demon. That's good. Economical card, but we do have some of the Legion to kind of keep it tapped down, so it's not going to be great for our opponent here. Got another play. Chainer's Edict. So, okay. That's fine. We'll lose a token. We'll get the token back on our upkeep. They can flash back that next turn, but again, they're just fighting back a wave of token generation. Not too concerned about that card. Oh, we draw Kozilek. So, if I sneak attack Kozilek, sacrifice a soldier to temp Desecration Demon, that's 12, 13, 14, 15. If our opponent doesn't have any answer to that, so that's lethal. If our opponent does have an answer, they're losing 4 lands. And we're still in pretty good shape. There's no real repercussions that are going to beat us that are on the battlefield. Alright. So let's sacrifice a soldier. Tap that down, and we'll attack for hopefully lethal. Yeah, that's what's nice about having the sneak attack in play. I mean, anytime we can just end a game. I mean, Legacy Cube has become kind of a sea of quasi-fair decks, and our deck is maybe one of the least fair. So we get there in game 1. Alright, sideboard. We know we're up against Reanimation. The first thing I'm going to say is show and tell, probably not great against this matchup because we might be able to show and tell something in, but our opponent may have something even better. Typically the Reanimation decks play the 6/6 Swamp Walk creature that forces you to sacrifice a creature every turn, and they get 1 back out of their graveyard every turn. That would pretty much just nullify whatever we show and tell out. So show and tell is not great. Repeal's okay here, I think, especially if the game goes long, and they do have some economical threats like Desecration Demons, so I think Repeal is just fine for cards like that. As far as what I'm going to take out, well, show and tell, I don't think Exclude is that great against our opponent either. Again, they do have a couple economical threats, but it seems like they just have a lot of small creatures, and then they're just trying to buy some time to get to their Reanimation strategy. Sower could be good. You might steal something big that comes out. But yeah, I think show and tell is bad in this matchup. Sneak attack's just fine. Show and tell is not great. Alright, so we'll just go with that. Just switch out repeal and show and tell. Alright, here is game 2. It's a land heavy hand. I don't know, this is borderline mulligan. I'm gonna keep it though. Here's why. I'm kind of hoping to draw into something, and we are ahead of game. We have an exclude to deal with a creature or a mid-range creature, and we can draw a card off that. And we do have the colors necessary to cast Assemble the Legion, which pretty much got us there last time. So this hand's a little slow, but if our opponent has an explosive start, we're in trouble. If our opponent doesn't have an explosive start, then oh, I just clicked through our turn. Wah wah. Oh, that's my bad. Magic Online, I love you. Alright, so my fault there. I F6 through our turn. which really I have no reason to be hitting the F6 button. I mean, we're well ahead on time and everything. I should just be taking my time and being more careful. So there's the lesson of the day. I mean, the best thing you can do when you make a misclick on Magic Online is try to put it out of your head. I know it's tough, but you just have to keep going and just play the board state as it is. You can't think about what if and what could have been different. I mean, yeah, I could be on 3 lands here playing an Old Man of the Sea, but dwelling on that's not going to be good for me. Not that that's a huge play, but we are behind a land drop now because of that. All right, it doesn't. So, oh, okay, yeah, he hit the 6/6 Swamp Walker. So if he has a reanimation spell, if our opponent can reanimate, we're pretty much done. Which maybe this isn't a bad hand to have misclicked. This may have been a losing game for us either way. But let's see. Our opponent is thinking about what they want to do. Going in the tank pretty hard if they maybe they don't have a reanimation spell. Oh, there it is, reanimate. Okay. Yeah, this is going to be tough for us because I also got Dragonlord Solmagar in there too. So, yeah, 6/6 Swamp Walker. Any creature we put out, we're going to have to sacrifice. Next turn, he's going to get Dragonlord Solmagar out of the graveyard. So, again, even if we do have a creature, our opponent's going to steal it. So and our opponent can just attack in. Now we don't have any swamps in our deck, which is nice, but still we're facing down a 6/6 and now a 3-power flyer too. So Repeal's really not going to do anything. Those high casting cost cards at this point. Opponent hasn't missed any land drops either, so they're in pretty good shape. That's the power of the reanimation deck. I mean, it can be explosive. Liliana Vess. Well, it's a discard a card, and that's fine. Just going to get rid of Exclude here. I don't necessarily see our opponent playing many more creatures or any more creatures that are going to make a difference anyway. And our other cards might have some use, at least some of them. Kind of thinking about here what I want to do. I mean, I don't want to show our opponent any cards they haven't seen, but they've seen everything in our hand except for the Repeal. So I'm just going to draw some cards here. Nothing that's really going to help us. And we are down to 5. Looks like our opponent has another play, perhaps. They're going to use Liliana. They're going to tutor. So even if we did have an answer, I'm sure they're going to tutor and put us away with something. In their position, I would tutor for something that would let me take a card out of the graveyard and put it in an attack with haste and then maybe sacrifice it, like those type of effects. Just because what I could have in my hand is like a Supreme Verdict or something, and that's the only way that we'd really get out of this situation. So if our opponent was able to pull something out with haste, then they'd be able to get the last 5 damage across. Assuming they have that in their deck. Yeah, I mean, I'm just thinking about whether I just want to scoop here or I want to. I don't know. I could just scoop, or I mean, I could make one more play and kind of just see if our opponent wants to show us the card they tutored for. I mean, they shouldn't, but you never know. I mean, sometimes people, especially when they tutor for something, they get an idea in their mind, so they. Let's get my mana right. Alright, I'm just gonna pass. See if they show us anything. No, just decking, which they should. There you have it. Alright, so let's go back to the sideboard now. We've seen a little more of their deck. I mean, nothing unexpected. I mean, those are the type of cards we'd expect to see, I guess, from this deck. Liliana, we know that there's a Planeswalker there now, so we'll keep show and tell out, of course. That's bad against us. But Supreme Verdict is a lot better, probably in this matchup. So we'll bring that in. Take out Threads of Disloyalty. Our opponent has a couple of cards that targets, but nothing significant. So we'll just take that out. It's going to add another Plains for that Supreme Verdict. And yeah, I think this is good. Our deck is very explosive too. I mean, if we have a good draw, I'm not too concerned about this next game. But it's still anyone's round, definitely. Yeah, I think this is good. Alright, so we're on the play, of course. And it's good hands. We have City of Brass give us any color, can allow us to play a couple of the counter spells, exclude and forbid, and we have a Gitaxian Probe for some card draw and see what our opponent's working with. And sneak attack, all we just have to do is draw a threat for sneak attack, and we're doing well. So let's see what our opponent's got. Go for the throat, Dark Ritual. So opponent can Dark Ritual and Desecration Demon pretty easily. Massacre Worm, they're a little ways off that. That's a pretty big threat, though. Doesn't cost that much mana, 6 mana. We get a Mana War, so that's actually very good because that's going to help us deal with the Desecration Demon that's going to be ritualed out. So if nothing else, it might be a tempo play, but we might be able to save ourselves a beating in the early portion of this game, since our opponent's going to be able to get that out before we have exclude mana up. So our opponent should be able to ritual right now into Desecration Demon, unless they drew a better play. And then our play next turn will probably be to Mana War that. Buy us another turn, and then maybe we can hold up Counter Magic. We'll just see what our opponent does. The only problem with that plan is if the game slows too much, our opponent can slowly get to that Massacre Worm. But hopefully by then we'll draw something for our sneak attack. Let's put the Plains down and let's Mana War. Great card, especially against mana acceleration like Dark Ritual. Alright, so our opponent can't replay that this turn, so that's nice. They're going to preordain. So they may be looking for a land. They may be short on lands. And they find one. they have no other play. So we keep drawing into lands, which isn't horrible right now. I mean, we are a very heavy control deck, so I don't mind having some extra lands at this point of the game. Go for the throat, that's fine. Rather have them use it on our Mana War than one of our big creatures. I kind of wonder why our opponent didn't hold that for a possible sneak attack. I mean, that's a good reason why it's good to hold sneak attack in our hand right now, so our opponent's not thinking along those lines. But get the Desecration Demon, and we're going to get it this time and draw a card off of it. And we get Deep Analysis. I mean, another thing we got to keep in mind too, we got a fair amount of cards in our hand, and we were able to draw 4 more cards off Deep Analysis. Forbid Lock might be a thing in this game too, so we're going to want to keep that strategy open, especially if we just can't draw into a threat. So anyone who's kind of played with that strategy before, Forbid Lock can be very difficult to get around. As long as I can keep drawing cards to pay the buyback price, I can basically just keep countering everything my opponent puts out. Hard to pull off in limited, especially when there aren't a whole lot of card draw options in this cube, and there's a few, but we have at least one of the best ones, if not the best one, with Deep Analysis. So let's see what we can do with it. And at some point we just simply need to draw into something like a Ulamog or Kozilek. Reanimate, okay. I think we're just going to forbid that. Once that Desecration Demon hits the board at this point, we don't really have an answer for it. So I think we just have to forbid. And I am gonna buy back the forbid. I'd like to keep the Bloodstained Mire, I think. I definitely want to keep the Deep Analysis. Probably don't need the Spell Pierce as our opponent's building up more and more mana. That becomes less good. I don't want to lose the sneak attack though either. So, and I actually have 2 sources of red because I have City of Brass. So yeah, Bloodstained Mire I guess isn't that important anymore. The other option though, yeah, if I just discard Deep Analysis, I can still draw 2 cards off of it, and I can hang on to the Spell Pierce. So I think that's where I'm going to go with this. I mean, at this point, Spell Pierce still works on like Dredge Return. Opponent has an answer. Do they have a counterspell? Impulse, okay. I could spell. Well, no, I couldn't Spell Pierce this. They could pay for it, so that's fine. Rather an Impulse than a Forbidden Alchemy, honestly. Alright, so we got Forbid back, perfect. Oh, okay, now there's some pressure we can finally put on our opponent. But we do want to, I mean, we at least want to think about holding on to Forbid, but we do want to get pressure out as well. So I think what I'm going to do is, I can play Deep Analysis, which still holds up Forbid, and I draw a couple more cards to continue possibility of doing a Forbid Lock, at least for a few more turns. Opponent only has 3 cards in their hand at this point. We get Opposition, which isn't really going to do much in this matchup. And although, I mean, if we could assemble the Legion out, but that's a lot of mana, especially when we're trying to hold up counterspells. I think Wormcoil Engine's a better finisher for us than trying to necessarily Opposition, assemble the Legion, and letting our opponent have creatures. That could be dangerous. Liliana, you know what? We can Spell Pierce this. So that's a great use of our Spell Pierce. Alright. So I'm glad I hung on to that. I was thinking about discarding it. Alright. Battlefield Forge. Now I can play Wormcoil Engine. Opponent still has 3 cards though in hand. So I'm going to hold up Forbid here. I'm just really concerned about Okay, our opponent plays nothing. Alright. At some point, I'll have enough lands to be able to play a threat and hold up forbid. If our opponent continues to do nothing. And every turn our opponent does nothing, we draw into another card. So right now, I'd have no problem pitching, say, opposition and the dragon here. I mean, that'd be fine. So I'm playing a little conservative. I'm just trying to play around the forbid, and I'm sure our opponent's playing around the forbid at this point as well. They have 4 cards in their hand. I'm sure they have some play. But they know I have forbid, obviously, in my hand. If I tap out, they may be able to reanimate something quite sizable. I'm actually just going to pass the turn here and throw a card away, get rid of opposition at this point, as opposed to actually playing anything. Just hold that forbid lock on our opponent. Ancient Tomb, that's nice. Now this allows me to start thinking about playing some things and still holding forbid up. So that's exactly the card we really wanted. In some ways that's even better than an Eldrazi, because we would have to tap out of forbid range at that point anyway to sneak attack and then put something in. Alright, so I'm going to play Assemble the Legion, and it still holds up forbid, so I can start putting some pressure on our opponent. They crack the Misty Rainforest. Alright, Vampire Hexmage, that's fine. They may have thrown that out there to see if I would forbid it, but I'm not going to. Because obviously they still have plenty of mana, and we know they still have the Massacre Worm out. I mean, they could play that, but obviously they know that it would be countered. They were hoping that we'd counter the Hexmage and then not be able to counter the Massacre Worm. Actually have enough mana at this point to put out Wormcoil Engine, so it's more pressure on our opponent. Opponent's clock is actually winding down too. They're down to 4 minutes, almost 4 minutes. Not to say they couldn't put us away. I mean, we are down to 12. We've been hurting ourselves with our spells, our lands pretty bad actually. But all right, our opponent's trying. Dragon Lord, Solmagar. Alright, that was Steal the Wormcoil Engine. I mean, this is kind of a last-ditch effort, I think, for our opponent. They're down to 2 mana. Not to say they couldn't have another good play, but we're going to just go ahead and forbid this with buyback. Just drop the dragon and hold Mana in the Sea. We'll hang on to the repeal, because we do have a lot of mana in case something slips by that we need to repeal. I'm playing very conservative this game, but again, we know our opponent does have a big castable threat in their hand from when we get Taxian Probed at the beginning of the game. So, okay, well, there's Kozilek. Now, I don't know, we want to think about this a little bit. I don't think we just want to... I can play Sneak Attack. I could run Kozilek out. Yeah, and I still have Forbid. I still have Forbid up. I just can't buy back it, but at this point it might not matter. So this will be good because this will also cut down on the amount of lands they have. I'm going to hold back a couple of our haste tokens just to be safe, just in case our opponent puts something out that they can attack in with haste, or they reanimate with haste and something slips by my forbid. I mean, it's becoming less and less likely considering our opponent is now down to 4 lands and a Hex Mage. And they only have a minute left on their clock too, so I guess it is what it is. But I'm sorry, 3 minutes left on their clock. So they can still win in 3 minutes with this deck. So I think that was a good play on our part. Kozilek's also going to let us now reshuffle our graveyard back into our hand, so we do get the ability to draw some more heat now, since so many of our lands are out on the battlefield. So now if I have to counter something, I'm going to lose Forbid, but I still have a repeal. Probably enough to get us there with Assemble the Legion. Oh, Languish, nice play, okay. I mean, that's not horrible for us though. Now our opponent did sacrifice the Hex Mage, so our Legion counters are back to 0. We're only going to get 1 soldier this turn, but that's okay, because now I'm going to draw a card, and that's going to give me a Forbid Lock. It's Kozilek again. So I have a couple options. I could just run Kozilek out here. Our opponent is tapped out. Our opponent would have to sacrifice 4 mana, but the cube does contain the is it the Black Pact that does let you destroy a creature at instant speed. So I'm just going to play it safe here. I'm just going to attack in for 7, puts our opponent down to 5. We're up to 21, and I have basically 2 counter spells this turn. If our opponent only has 4 mana. So I probably could have won last turn, but I'm just not going to take any chances here. Our opponent has 5 cards in hand. They could have had a 0 casting cost. I can't remember the name of that card. The 0 casting cost instant removal spell, and it could have thrown us off a little bit. So, and our opponent has Dredge Return, which they can actually play. So we're going to forbid that. Because, yeah, it only costs 4 for Dread Return. So, I'm going to forbid that. And now our opponent, again, is tapped out. But, just in case, I'm going to play safe. I'm going to buy back the forbid. Although, at this point, I'm not really sure what else our opponent could do. I mean, they could slow us down, potentially, if they had removal, 0 casting cost to get rid of our Wormcoil Engine. So, again, I'm just playing an ultra conservative safe game, thinking about how we could still lose this game, and our opponent gives up at this point. So, and they only had 49 seconds left on their clock. So that was quite the game. So that one was actually pretty crazy, and that third game was actually a lot of fun. I feel like we played that one very well. We could have been a lot more aggressive, but I think we would have paid for it in the long run. It was a slow, grindy, controlling game, but I think we made some good choices there. So we're going on to match 3. I will see you in the next video.